Welcome to Operations Utopia. My name is Matt Neal. For the last 30 years, since the late 1900s, I've been involved in global regulatory operations and technology across multiple life sciences organizations from startup biotech to global industry leaders. Through the sharing of keynotes, industry forums, and interviews with industry leaders and experts, I hope to share knowledge, highlight opportunities, and explore technology innovations around this very niche topic. First, a disclaimer. This podcast reflects only the opinion of the podcaster and guests and does not reflect those of their organizations, system vendors, or service providers. This first episode is a remote interview presentation I gave at the Implement Consulting Group's first Veeva Collaborative Consortium in November of 2025. I'll add links in the show notes if you'd like to explore opportunities with Implement. But this is excerpts from an interview fireside chat thing that my friend, my longtime collaborator and friend Fritz Stolp gave. He was kind enough to host that session remotely, but when they published the video, it didn't have the questions in there, so I'll insert those so you can follow along. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the first episode of Operations Utopia. The first question out of the gate was, what do you want Veeva to be for you? An app, a platform, or a strategic vendor?
I think there's this huge chasm between what organizations think they're getting and what they end up with when it comes to Veeva. And I think that is a complicated problem at most organizations, because when configured correctly, and that's a huge part of it, that's a huge part of it. When configured and managed correctly, Veeva, not just in the RIM space, but across, I think, the full spectrum, really can and should be the operating system for a life sciences organization. It can contain all of the information you need to run your business. The problem is it's usually not configured to deliver that, in a way across organizations, whether the organizations are siloed, whether they didn't connect them correctly, whether they didn't think about the long-term implications of how they configure the system. All of those things come into play, and I think that is complicated at an organization because you have multiple players that have different levels of knowledge about what they're getting into. So you may have a IT organization that's really good at configuring databases and making sure they're secure, but they don't know what the business need is, and the language that they speak is requirements, right? Well, if the business doesn't know what's possible, their requirements are going to be terrible, and then IT is going to implement them to the letter, and the business isn't going to be happy. Yeah. You also have quality organizations that over-validate an already existing validated SaaS-served system in a modern tech stack, like it's being installed by floppy disks, which also slows down the whole process. So you have tentatively 3 entities coming together to deliver a business solution, and none of them actually know how to do it. And I think that's the spot that Veeva ends up in most times. Configured into oblivion and everybody hates it. Slow to adopt new things that Veeva spends their money to build, and really a fundamental understanding of what it is and why it's so powerful. It's not an orange documentum or an orange file share. It's an information management system that also manages documents. And that key is where the magic happens. So if you do it right, you have an incredibly well-connected, powerful ecosystem. If you do it wrong, you have a mess, and you have disparate data systems not talking to each other. You're in data remediation forever, and it just goes horribly wrong. So Veeva strategically means to my organization, and what I want to build is an operating system for R&D that has all the answers that I need, has the complete product history, is traceable, stands up to inspection and audit, and everything in it is discoverable, and it's mostly user-friendly and easy to use.
The next question was, what is your view on validation? I do have some pretty strong thoughts on validation, and I'll put a link in the show notes to an article I wrote with some colleagues a few years ago called Unleash RIM, and that'll probably be the subject of an upcoming episode here as well. But here was my take from the conversation with Fritz.
In my opinion, absolutely, we over-validate. But I don't want to misconstrue that for we shouldn't validate. What it should be is actually smart, modern validation, leveraging what's available to us from a technology standpoint. And it's actually much easier to keep track of things in the way that we do it, which I don't think is rocket science, but it's apparently sort of unique. We create evidence that is traceable. We create business justification for all the changes in the system. But the people that decide that have nothing to do with what has traditionally been sort of like a quality organization, making sure you have a 50-page user acceptance test with screenshots and signatures on it. It's really the methodology that you use as a robust business log, essentially, that leverages the existing tools in the system, like audit trail. Very detailed audit trail is available for every single click, and you can associate every single click to a change if you really want to. But I would challenge people, even if you save that level of detail, I don't believe you will ever show it to anyone, nor will anyone ask you for it when it comes to how the system functions. Will they question a process? Will they question that you've ensured that your workflows are correct to ensure either patient safety or product quality? Yes, they should be able to do that. But do they care if you added 5 values to a drop-down menu in your system? No. It's an information management system meant to manage information flexibly and in a way that adds to business discoverability and business usability. And I would argue that a lot of times the current methods not only slow down progress, but actually make you more at risk for your changes. Because, for example, and I'm using this as a very simple example. I think this usually most people now are graduating to the point where this is sort of a standard type change that doesn't require months of overhead, but let's just use it because it'll make sense. Adding pick list values to a checkbox, right? So, or to a drop-down box. If that takes you 3 months, let's just say change control process, by the time you get it through and somebody tests it, puts it in the sandbox, puts it in validation, and then pushes it to production. Let's say it takes 3 months. Let's say it only takes a month. During that month, how are people tracking this information they've asked you to add to the system to track it? Emails, spreadsheets, it's not in the system of record. Instead of, hey, I need these extra values added so I can actually start tracking because this health authority asked me to look for this or to dissect my data this way or that. That's a change that takes minutes in the system. And the user can literally just say, okay, I refreshed my screen. Now I see those drop downs. Thank you. I'll start tracking this way. Now we're completely protected because we have an audit trail that the business user said, I need these drop downs. A business admin said, yes, that makes sense if that's how you want to track your information, and there's no implications to reporting or other things that this may be connected to. It's just a text field. Sure, I'll add it. They do it and give it back to the customer. Maybe it takes a day. Maybe you have to test it in the sandbox for a few days, or you have workflows attached to it. All that understood. That's why you have a sandbox. Test it. Make sure your process works. But the documentation to say you went to the admin screen, which, by the way, we didn't code, it's available in the system. I go to the admin change, I click on things, what we call, I don't know if they call it WYSIWYG anymore. It's not even low code. It's literally, if it's on the screen and it's a checkbox, I can impact it. You do that change, all of that's tracked too.
Yeah.
So we are wrapped around so many axles configuring a system that it slows us down getting that inspectability, but it also sort of wastes Veeva's very high rate of improvement to the system.
Yeah.
So if they're putting 100 features every 3 months into the system, and most of pharma says, hey, slow down, stop innovating, stop improving the system. We got a backlog of changes we need to do screenshots on. That's wild to me. And then if that slows down, that means less people are actually testing the features to make sure they do what they expected them to do in large groups, and that slows Veeva down. And I don't think there's any other scenario where we would ask a technology company to slow down and stop improving. I mean, obviously there's the people get mad that their iPhone stops working and stuff as they improve things curiously around the release of new products, but we still want it to get better. We still want it to improve on a regular basis. And you wouldn't be like, nah, stop developing, stop improving these things.
All right, the next question was, how do you help the business or IT decide which new Veeva features to implement now versus backlog?
So I had the opportunity at Atara to perform somewhat of a psychological experiment on the user base and learned a lot from it, actually. So we managed several vaults, as most companies do. We had a RIM vault and a quality vault, PromoMats, a couple, a handful of vaults across R&D. And you may recall, it was several years ago, they had a huge makeover of the interface. A lot of icon changes, the color changed of the whole platform. I think it went from like a gray to blue. I forget what the top line is, but it looked different. It was a cosmetic major change. And they pushed it as a choice in August, and it was forced in December, basically. Now, our company freaked out because they had to change all their documentation because the screenshots were going to change, right? I argued that I don't think people will notice. If you tell them this icon changed, this important icon you use often is changing from this picture to that picture, or it moved from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, and the bar at the top is going to be a different color, they're going to be okay. So we created a very detailed was is document, sent it a few weeks before the August push. And the psychological experiment is I said, hey, I'm going to volunteer my vault to be the guinea pig. And that way, if something is crazy and goes amiss, you guys on the quality side will have 3 months to prepare for it, because it's coming in December, whether you like it or not. But I'm not going to delay my implementation, because this is SaaS software. Just like Microsoft Office, it changes all the time and you have no control over it. And we don't take the users offline for weeks to train them. People are fairly savvy. And I think COVID pandemic actually helped that quite a bit also. It accelerated the user adoption of tools. They had to get used to it, right? So we have a different group of users as well. So we did it. We turned it on. Nothing happened. Nobody cared. Nobody said anything. Nobody was lost. One person actually asked a question about it, but then admitted, I didn't read your email that told me where the button was moving. So small sample size. It was a smaller company, maybe, but even still enough daily users that when it changes so drastically, you think the business would come to a screaming halt. It doesn't, because the user base is used to software changing now. Yeah. So, I mean, that was a big one that really changed my mindset around what people will tolerate. So we take everything, every release, turn it on, we'll take it. We'll figure it out after it goes live. We have a month to prepare. You know what's coming. And if anything is going to significantly change business process, you get ahead of it and say, hey, next month on that Friday, this button's going to move. This process is going to change. It's going to take us a week to fix your report. Whatever the case may be, take all of the stuff, turn it on, because it's there for a reason. In most cases, it's meant to improve. And that scares people because they've already over-configured their system. So if you don't over-configure and you stay on template, and when you are doing things, you ask Veeva, like, hey, if I add this field, are you going to add this field later? Is this an object that's going to need to be deprecated later? As long as you stay looking forward, those releases are not a panic. They're a welcome. Like, when are we getting that feature? Cool. Next R3, sweet. And then you can tell the users, hey, that thing you've been waiting for is now happening. And we can tell you when that's happening. HAQ is a perfect example. They've advanced the health authority question technology extremely in the last year. So if you are 2 releases behind in the choice to turn those on, you are slowing your business down from an HAQ ingestion standpoint. So we take it all when it comes, but I know that's unique.
The next question was, has your prioritization and validation approach impacted your implementation timeline?
100%. Yeah. So we implemented Veeva publishing. We already had Veeva RIM. So we had a RIM system. It was okay. I would say it needed a lot of work, right? It had been sitting there for many years. It had been configured poorly, whatever. And people didn't like it. It wasn't user friendly. We're getting to the point now where, it's been about a year, so we've restructured it quite a bit. But we implemented the publishing system in 16 weeks. I think we wasted about 4 of those weeks. It could have been faster, but a couple of lessons learned. But yeah, a lot of it had to do with our validation strategy. A lot of it had to do with thoughtful risk taking around what we did with Veeva. And I think one thing I haven't mentioned about the relationship is that we needed to establish an extremely trust-based relationship with the Veeva team, the implementation team, our product reps, to say, we're accepting the risk, for example, that we're not going to do these workshops. And that's a risk for Veeva, because when they do implementations, if they run a workshop, for example, that's them checking the box that they told you how to use the system. You can't complain afterwards that they didn't tell you how to use the system, basically. And they would get, I'm sure they had, a lot of customers that would do this to them, because, again, going back to the psychological experiment, people don't learn that way. If you run a workshop or a process exercise and they don't see the tool for 6-8 months until it goes into production, for example, that workshop is completely wasted.
Yeah.
Right? So we did that much differently. The validation was part of that, which is, we're not going to waste another 4 weeks going from sandbox to val and running the same exact things again, because it's still a sandbox. You just called it validation. It's just a SaaS instance.
Yeah.
And then so is production. So what we learn pushing from sandbox to val, we learn from pushing from val to production. So let's skip val and go right to production and fix it when it gets there. Now, I know that's going to freak a lot of people out, but I would submit to you that you could call val sandbox and you could do that exercise as many times as you want. I made the assumption that Veeva was pretty good at going from one instance to another. They do it all the time. So we're just paying them to do it twice and check it twice when it's made no sense. So we did jump through a lot of those things, and they had to trust that we weren't going to freak out if something went wrong when they went to production, because we chose to risk saying, yeah, let's skip this 4 weeks and not do this twice.
So the next question was, how do you approach realizing the benefits?
Well, I think I was lucky in both instances here, in that I inherited a Veeva system. So I wasn't arguing to put Veeva in, right? So that's a hurdle. If there's, the first instance, the first time you're going to go there, I think it's a much bigger climb for a lot of organizations. I had no migration worries. It was, okay, we have Veeva. There was nowhere to go but up, right? And sort of, it's an unfair advantage in both instances where I've done this, because it couldn't get worse. So everything that I implemented was a benefit, for the most part, to the organization. So at Atara, for example, that made Veeva usable for the team. It helped across the board take so many manual processes out of play, actually using workflows, actually using views, using these things. That made a huge difference. And at a smaller company, it's a little looser, so that it was an obvious, like you could use a survey and say, from 6 months ago to now, has your experience improved, right? But when you have a small set of products or portfolio, the measurements only mean so much, right? But we did see significant reductions in submission time, and in handoff of the last document to publishing. We had metrics now, right? It wasn't a black box. We weren't handing off to different CROs and vendors and cobbling together the time. We knew the time. So I kind of approach it like, we're going to implement, we're going to use best practices, and I will illustrate the benefits once we're in production. Yeah. So that's probably unique too. I have great leadership that trusts that I'm going to give you 6 months, then show me the results, right? And I know that it works. So it's I'm working with house money. I know that what I implement is going to work. I know that it's going to improve the cycle times. I know that it's going to improve the publishing times. There's no question. It can't get worse than the manual processes are there. So I'm really looking at it like down the road in a few years, starting in about a year or so, these metrics are going to be so powerful and compelling. And we can then look to expand the utility across vaults, because I'm the vault owner of the RIM vault. I can influence, I can help the quality team, I can help the TMF team, because Veeva is Veeva. But those kind of tangible things weren't a go-in position for me, luckily.
In this last section, Fritz just asked if I had any final thoughts.
I would just say, think about this as a mindset that is really beneficial, and it's across with the vendor and your own internal teams. It took me 18 months to break the paradigm of validation at Atara. It only took me 5 months at B1. So I improved my my powers of coercion, I guess, to get the validation paradigm and help them see the light. But it's conversations. It's really understanding the why of what you're doing, which to me, this came into clear focus at Atara. The patient time is what I'm thinking about. At Atara, we had a lot of emergency use authorization products. So the time that documents spent in our shop before we could get them, right? That was patient time. And it meant, like, if you get the drug on Friday, you live another 6 months. If you don't get the drug on Friday, you're gone by Sunday. Like, it was extremely powerful and centered me on this time thing. We are obligated to do what we can in the most efficient way possible. That is, something that we can stand up to inspection. We're not breaking the rules. We're not cheating any stuff here. We're just doing it as fast as humanly possible with that why in place, and question the things you've always done. Like, look at it. Really think about, why are we doing this way?